really matters? That might be the most important question you can ask. So let's talk about it. Welcome to What Really Matters podcast, Everyday Spirituality with Karen Wyatt. Thanks for joining me here again today. We're moving on with another episode in my travels through Italy a number of years ago, where I was dealing with grief and loss and guilt. And I found myself conducting a novena, which means that each day for 9 days, I said a prayer for healing and support and solace for grief for the family of a patient who had died on the day that I left on the trip, and for my grief and my guilt as well over my father's death. So this is part 5 of the series. And at this point in my travels, I was still in the city of Florence. Again, I've already remarked about what an amazing and beautiful city it is, so full of so much to see there. I can't even begin to describe it in just these 2 episodes, but so I'm just picking out a few of the very special experiences that I had there. I mentioned already Il Duomo, Santa Maria del Fiore, the cathedral in Florence with its massive, impressive dome, but not far away, just a few blocks away, is another church very, very different from Il Duomo. This is the Church of Orson Michele, which was originally a granary back in the 10th century and was eventually walled in and converted into a church. And so it's rather modest in comparison to Il Duomo, but also very fascinating. And inside that church, I found something very interesting there, which was a painting of mother and child called the Madonna della Grazia. And it was painted by Bernardo Daddi. It was the 3rd version of that painting that had been placed there because the previous 2 versions had each been destroyed by fire within the church, which I guess was common back then because many structures were made of wood. There were burning candles and also burning wood stoves for heat inside the building, so fire was fairly common. But the previous 2 versions of this very same painting had been destroyed. So this one had been created by Bernardo Daddi in apparently 1347, which was just a few months before the first wave of the Black Plague hit Florence. And apparently the painting in the past had been associated with many miracles and healings. And so the existence of this painting, finally this 3rd version, during the Black Plague was very important for many people who came there to pray for healing. And there were still many stories of miracles and healings that took place for people who said a prayer to this particular painting. So I thought that was interesting and thought, well, that would be a good place for the next novena. So the 4th novena took place there at the Church of Orson Michele. And this painting is housed in a tabernacle that's really spectacular and really beautiful because the painting itself is associated with miracles. It was given this very beautiful, ornate silver structure as a frame to house it. But the structure is as tall as the building is. It's really remarkable. So again, the painting is named Madonna della Grazia, which means the Madonna of the Graces, or the Mother of Grace, I guess would be another translation for that. So my novena prayer for the day took place in that small little church. And then we walked on to another church, the Basilica of Santa Croce. It was there we learned about a devastating flood that took place in 1966 when the Arno River that flows through Florence overflowed its banks. And this particular church was very much affected by the flooding. The water, we heard, reached heights of 6.7 meters, and it carried with it huge amounts of mud that were deposited everywhere. Apparently, 101 people were killed in the flooding. But also many structures and many artworks were damaged by the floodwaters and the mud that encased everything. It was a massive cleanup effort after the flooding happened, just to try to restore this church and other parts of the city that had been damaged by the flood and the mud, but also all of the cherished works of art that had been damaged. And on Santa Croce Church, you can see it today, there's a watermark showing where the floodwaters rose to on the side of the church. But we also learned that there were what they called mud angels who came to help restore the artworks that had been damaged. And there were all sorts of art lovers and art historians and even art restorers who came to Florence apparently and helped out with rescuing the works of art that had been damaged and restoring them back to their natural form. And time was of the essence, from what I understood, to clean these works of art before any further damage happened. So all these volunteers, they called them mud angels, arrived in Florence and helped clean up the city and restore the artworks. And it was really a phenomenal gathering of support, of volunteer support, of people who came around to help after that catastrophe. And as we left that church and walked along our way, we came to the Arno River, and we took a bridge across the river, which is called Grazie Bridge. So we learned that bridge had been named also for Madonna della Grazia, which was an oratory on the side, on the bank where the bridge had been built, and the bridge was named for that oratory, but also named Madonna of the Graces, just like the painting in the Orson MacLeod Church. And there on that bridge, I learned every year on the anniversary of the flood that took place, there's a ceremony, a ritual of remembrance and really grieving and mourning that takes place on the bridge. And wreaths are laid on that bridge, the Grazia Bridge. And so it's the bridge of graces, the bridge of thankfulness, the bridge of gratitude in a way. And it's a memorial and a remembrance for the people who died, and in some ways a ceremony of gratitude for the people who came and helped. And it's a way that the city has decided to never forget the catastrophe that happened in the not so distant past. I mean, there have been lots of past historical catastrophes, but this one was within the memory of the people living there. And so we stopped for a moment on that bridge and just looked out at the water of the river and imagined what it was like when the river overflowed its banks to such an incredible height, just the rushing water and mud that were flowing from there, and how terrifying and frightening it must have been to be there. And in that moment, as I was standing on the bridge at the site where the memorial takes place, something came to me, an inspiration came to me, and it was the 5 gratitudes. So on the middle of Grazia Bridge, where the memorial takes place, where the flooding had happened, the 5 gratitudes, and these just popped into my head, and I wrote them down because it felt so profound in the moment. So I'll tell you what they are. The 5 gratitudes I thought of so many years ago. First, for life, gratitude for life itself. Gratitude for love, that we are able to experience and receive love while we're here during this life. Gratitude for laughter, that life provides us with the ability to laugh and moments when laughter can arise spontaneously from us. But also gratitude for loss, because it is loss that deepens us, loss that makes transformation and growth possible. It is loss that leads us into this desert of grief and the ashes of grief from which we are able to transcend and rise again with new awareness and new knowledge and new inspiration. And the fifth gratitude that came to me, and I don't fully understand this, as I said, it came to me in the moment, so I wrote it down. The fifth gratitude was for longing. And I guess I could describe that feeling of, it felt tangible to me on the bridge, a feeling of simply longing, a sense that there is more than just this moment. There's more than just this life that I'm living. There's more than just me, more than just my physical existence. There's something more, and there is a longing or a yearning for that, for the growth that will get me to that greater place. And in the moment, right here, right now, there is this sense of longing, along with the other four gratitudes: life, love, laughter, loss, longing. So those were the five things that came to me, and it still feels profound to me, the insight that I felt and the power of those feelings as I stood on the bridge. And I guess about the longing question again, I could describe that also as being part of the soul of place and feeling like so connected with that place in time and space, geographically being there. A sense of longing for fruition, longing for completion, longing for the growth that is going to come. And I don't know if that even makes sense, but that's what's coming to me now as I look back at that moment on the bridge. So, wow, after already a really interesting, profound day, and we had seen so many other things in addition, but I can't talk about all of them because there isn't enough time. We continued to walk across the bridge to Oltrarno, which is the other side of the Arno, and that's kind of a subdivision of Florence. And we walked through Oltrarno because there are many beautiful sites on that side of the river, just as in Rome, on the other side of the Tiber River is Trastevere, which is a very beautiful area and very worth exploring. In both cases, the other side of the river tends to be a little bit more working class, but so real and so down to earth, these areas of these bigger cities. So we walked around Oltrarno and ended up going uphill, up to the top of the hill to Piazzale Michelangelo, which is a big plaza, I guess you could call it, where there's a replica of the statue of David sitting up on top of the hill. And it's actually really magnificent to see it outside in the sunlight against the sky, the statue of David kind of presiding there over the whole city of Florence at the top of this hillside. It's a fantastic walk just to get the view, and you can stand on the Piazzale, look out across the Arno River and see the Duomo, and see the baptistry and the tower. You can see all of Florence just displayed across the river so beautifully, and the lighting's really amazing from up there too, probably depending on the time of day that you go, but that was a really spectacular view. So we took that in and took lots and lots of pictures, just an incredible perspective on the city, and the city we'd been walking around in for 2 days, to actually rise above it on the hillside and now have the view from a higher vantage point and kind of looking down at all these landmarks we had seen before. It's really incredible. and reminds us that sometimes we need to shake up our perspective. We need to look at things from a different angle and a different height and, a different level of consciousness in a way, in order to see all the beauty that's present there. So that was the Piazzale Michelangelo. And we continued walking a little bit higher. We came to yet another church. Well, there's so many churches everywhere. All of them are incredible and beautiful. But this church, this was the most unique church I have ever seen. Apparently, construction began on this church back in the 11th century. So it's extremely old. It's remarkable in so many ways. This is the first time I had ever really witnessed sacred geometry, I guess you could call it. And I guess it's present actually, from what people say, in many of the churches in Rome, and in other parts of Italy. But at this church, it seemed very apparent that there was an intentional use of geometry in the structure of everything inside the church. And even the way the church is situated, where the windows are placed inside the church, it's fascinating. And we spent hours there because we were reading all about it. And first of all, there is a large zodiac symbol built in the floor in the center of the church, in mosaic tiles. And so it's kind of this overlap of astronomy and astrology and religion all coming together. And so this zodiac symbol, which was really fascinating, you could see the signs of the zodiac and the symbols for each one of the signs arranged in this circular form on the floor. But what's really fascinating is the windows in the upper level of the church are situated so that at various times of the year, the sunlight shines through those windows and strikes the zodiac tiles on the floor in specific places. And so here's an example that I read about from someone who was actually there to witness this. It was on the day of the summer solstice, as the sunlight comes in through this particular window. It's the third nave window. The rays of sun shine exactly down onto the sign of Cancer on the floor, the zodiac symbol on the floor, and they form a perfect circle of light that fits right over the circular design of the crab for Cancer on the floor. And so, apparently when the church was built, this was all intentional, and they understood astrology and astronomy, and understood how to orient the church, where to put the windows, and how to direct the rays of sun to various places. This was just mind-blowing to me. And here's more, that apparently the figures of Christ and the Virgin Mary on this mosaic in the apse of the church are illuminated by the sun during Easter. And also the altar of the crypt, which is below the main church, and that contains the relics of St. Miniato, for whom the church is named. That altar is illuminated by sunlight on the day of the martyrdom of St. Miniato. And while we weren't visiting the church on any specific holiday or special day, we did stay in the church for a few hours because it was so interesting to watch the rays of the sun as they came in through different windows and illuminated different parts of the church, and seeing how intentionally it was built and the symbolism that was built into the church. And probably I don't even know about, 90% of what's there and what was built into that church. But it really fascinated me. And again, it created this sense of place and sense of connection with people who so long ago were trying to understand the universe and the workings of nature and trying to connect and see all the connections and see all the networks and all the threads that bring all of us together. And once again, I just felt held and seen and contained in a certain way. And by being in that place, it was just such a powerful experience. But there's still a little bit more, because after we left the church, we walked outside to discover a cemetery. And I rather like exploring cemeteries wherever we travel. So we walked through the Porta Santa cemetery, and it was fascinating. And there were many beautiful sculptures, grave site sculptures within this cemetery, the likes of which I haven't seen before either in cemeteries. Sculptures of a young man and a young woman holding hands, life-size sculptures, one of a mother with 4 little children at her feet, another one of the body of a man grieving, just spread out, laying over the top of a grave. So remarkable, beautiful sculptures in this cemetery, and it was very compelling to walk through it and just see the memorials and also mausoleums, and remarkably beautiful and old sculptures that were contained there. But I came across on a patio within the cemetery a contemporary modern sculpture that was on display in the center. The name of it in English was Infinite Column Increasing. And I read about it. It was created by Park Yoon's son, a Korean sculptor. And I didn't know it at the time, but apparently his works were on loan and on a special exhibition in Florence at the time we were there. And they were only there for probably less than a year, but it happened to be this exhibit was there while we were visiting. So I got to see it. When I saw it, I thought it was a permanent part of the cemetery, but it was only on loan and only a special exhibit. So it's hard for me to describe this sculpture to you, but imagine an inverted cone or like a funnel, that starts out very small at the bottom and rises up, getting larger and larger toward the top. And it's made up of layers of granite and marble that are stacked one on top of the other. But there are cracks in every layer, cracks and displacements, and even halfway up, the whole structure has a break in it, and the top half is a little bit displaced from the bottom half. So it's not a perfect continuous whole rising up. But it was remarkable to me and touched me in so many ways. And I read about it that this particular sculptor always uses asymmetry in his sculptures. He also always shows this idea of increasing, a spreading form. He likes the idea of continuous growth. And so his sculptures are named infinite and increasing or growing or transcending, because they're always reaching up and they're expanding as they grow. And so it looked to me like, wow, this amazing picture of consciousness expanding over time, and how the Renaissance represented this amazing expansion of consciousness growing larger and larger in the amount that consciousness can take in and hold. And yet there are these breaks and these imperfections and these discontinuities in the process of all the growth. And what was written about all of the sculptor's works, that, let me see if I can find what was written. It said, let's see, what is always prevalent is the opening up inside through cracks and holes, that there are cracks and holes that allow us to see into the inside and that allow the inside to also grow as the outside is growing, and that they create a dialogue between full and empty, high and low, heaven and earth, part and all, man and cosmos. Wow. So, like, I'm reading all of this and thinking, again, mind blown, this one sculpture representing everything that I had been experiencing and witnessing on this novena trip through Florence, and learning about the devastation of the plague, the transcendence of the Renaissance, and ongoing, continuous, ongoing growth as the sculpture was representing, that it doesn't stop. It keeps growing, even though yet there are fractures and there are displacements and there are times when everything seems out of balance and it has to work its way back toward a balance again in order to hold together. But this broken, fractured, gorgeous statue was such a final emblem for me, I guess, of everything that I had experienced in these 2 days of novenas in Florence, and seeing so clearly for myself in my own life how I needed to be able to allow the imperfections and the flaws and the breaks and the fractures and the losses and the pain that come with life and the suffering and the longing that comes with it, because that is the only way toward the growth that is happening at the same time. It's the only way. I have to allow all of it to happen because it all happens together. It's all part of the same thing. And I could see so clearly that resisting the pain of grief over my father's death, over the death of my patient, would only cause me to shrivel up and shrink down, and would slow down the growth and the transcendence that life is really all about. And so that those 2 days in Florence allowed me to immerse myself more fully into the grief and the pain, but also more fully into every moment of joy and celebration and living life and loving every aspect of it and seeing everything and taking it all in and holding all of it on this amazing trip through Italy. And so I hope I'm conveying to you this incredible patchwork tapestry of experiences that was taking place and really all weaving itself together before my very eyes on this incredible trip. So I'll end there with that day in Florence. And as I said, there's even more, but I just can't fit all of it into these episodes. But I just wanted to convey to you this remarkable experience of travel. And it wasn't intentional travel while grieving. I didn't want to be grieving. And when I was grieving, I didn't really want to take the trip, but they coincided. It coincided that my grief arose at the same time as this trip. So there I was, traveling with my grief through Italy and dealing with it, but also having my mind and my heart expanded and seeing things differently. And it was an incredible experience, and there's more. So I'll continue to share other aspects of this trip for you to learn along with me as we go. So until the next time we're together, remember, we're here for love. So face your fear, be ready for whatever life brings you next, and love each and every moment of your very precious existence. Bye-bye.